Arthur Bellamy paid them $15,500 for work I would have done for him in 2 hours at the counter at the post. Arthur Bellamy died on the 23rd of September, 2025. His class action restitution check came in January of 2027. There was no one alive to hand it to. In April of 2026, a federal class action was filed in the United States District Court for the Central District of California against Sentinel Veterans Aid, LLC. The class size was approximately 8,400 disabled veterans. 7 of them had died before the complaint was filed. I am an accredited Veterans Service Officer at American Legion Post 509 in Fresno, California. I have worked without pay for 12 years. This is what all of it turned out to be. My name is Denise Collins Evans. I am 54 years old. My husband, Kirk, served as a United States Army Specialist 4 from 1972 to 1976. He was at Fort Lewis, and then he was at Cam Ranh Bay. He came home. He did not talk about Cam Ranh Bay. He worked at a dairy plant outside Fresno for 29 years. In 2005, after the dairy plant closed, he took a civilian contractor position with a logistics firm and shipped to Baghdad. He was there until 2008. He came home again. In January of 2020, he was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. He died on the 14th of September, 2021. The Department of Veterans Affairs approved the Agent Orange presumptive claim posthumously in February of 2022. I was already an accredited Veterans Service Officer by then. I had been an accredited VSO at American Legion Post 509 since 2013. I had helped my own husband with his own claim. I had done his paperwork at our own kitchen table. I want to tell you what an accredited Veterans Service Officer is, because most Americans do not know this role exists. Under Title 38 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Part 14, the Department of Veterans Affairs does not permit just anyone to prepare or present a veteran's claim for benefits. The preparation and presentation of a claim is a regulated activity. You must be an accredited representative. Accreditation is granted to attorneys, to independent claims agents, and to representatives of certain veterans service organizations. American Legion is a veterans service organization accredited to provide free representation to any veteran, whether or not the veteran is a Legion member. So are the VFW, the Disabled American Veterans, the Paralyzed Veterans of America, AMVETS, and a number of smaller congressionally chartered groups. At American Legion Post 509, I am the only accredited VSO. I have been so for 12 years. The service I provide is free. It is required by federal law to be free when it is provided through an accredited VSO. There is one thing I want you to hold in your mind as I tell you what happened. A federal regulation requires that certain work be done for free by accredited people for a specific vulnerable class of Americans. That federal regulation has been in place, in one form or another, for more than 50 years. It exists because disabled veterans are a class of Americans who cannot protect themselves from the complexity of the federal bureaucracy that was designed to serve them. The regulation is the shield. It has been quietly picked apart by a particular kind of company that does not even pretend to be an accredited representative, and that found a way to charge men and women like Arthur Bellamy $15,500 for what I would have done for free in an afternoon. My house sits on a block in East Central Fresno, in a neighborhood of 1970 ranch houses with low stucco walls and white rock yards. I bought it with Kirk in 1989. He is in the wedding photograph in the hallway. I am 20 years old in that photograph. He is 27. He is wearing his dress blues. I am wearing the dress my mother made. Beside the wedding photograph is a framed document from the American Legion confirming my accreditation as a Veterans Service Officer. The document has his last name on it because I took his last name, and the Legion accredits in the name on my driver's license. Kirk's photograph from his time at Cam Ranh Bay sits on the windowsill over the stove in my kitchen. He is in olive drab fatigues. He is 23 years old. He is not smiling. There is a gold star widow's pin on my dresser. I wear it with my Legion auxiliary pin on my lapel every day. I have worn both pins together for 4 years. Arthur Bellamy came to the post on a Tuesday afternoon in the winter of 2023. He was 68 years old. He had served as a combat engineer in 1970, and he had taken traumatic brain injury from an explosive ordnance incident outside of Da Nang. His rating with the Department of Veterans Affairs had been 60% for service-connected TBI for a long time. He came in looking for me, and I was at the counter with another veteran, and he sat down in one of the folding chairs by the wall, and he waited. He was very quiet. His hands were on his knees. When I finished with the other veteran, Arthur stood up and he walked to the counter and he said, "Miss Denise, I am in trouble." I said, "What kind of trouble, Arthur?" He said, "I gave some people some money and now they will not return my calls, and I do not know what to do." I said, "What people, Arthur?" He said, "I do not remember the name of the company. It is not here. It is somewhere in Florida. They called me. They said they could get my rating increased from 60% to 80%. They said I would be entitled to a lot more money every month. They said they could do the paperwork for me. They said they were the experts. They were very nice. They were very patient. I said yes. I signed something on my phone. I paid them a deposit of $3,000. Then, when the rating increase came through last month, they took another $12,500 off my debit card. Miss Denise, that was $15,500 total. That was almost all of what I had. My rating did go up to 80%, but now they will not return my calls. I thought they were the experts. I thought they were going to help me with more things." I said, "Arthur, sit down." He sat down. I said, "Arthur, may I look at what you signed, if you still have it on your phone?" He showed me his phone. It was a digital engagement letter, 4 pages. The company name at the top of the document was Sentinel Veterans Aid, LLC, address in Pensacola, Florida. The engagement letter stated that Sentinel Veterans Aid was a veterans benefits advocacy firm. It stated that Sentinel Veterans Aid would prepare, present, and advocate for Mr. Bellamy's claim for an increased rating. It stated that the deposit was non-refundable. It stated that the success fee would be triggered upon a rating increase and would be equal to 2 times the monthly benefit differential for the first 12 months. It stated that Mr. Bellamy authorized automatic debit of the success fee from the debit card on file on the date of the first payment at the new rating. It did not state anywhere on those 4 pages that Sentinel Veterans Aid was not accredited by the Department of Veterans Affairs to prepare or present claims. It did not state that the preparation and presentation of VA claims is regulated under Title 38, Code of Federal Regulations, Part 14. It did not state that Arthur Bellamy was entitled to free representation through any accredited veterans service organization, including the one 4 blocks from his house. I said, "Arthur, may I look at the claim document that they filed on your behalf?" He said, "I do not have it. They said they kept it. I did not know I was supposed to have it." I said, "Arthur, that is all right. We will get a copy from the VA. It is your record. You are entitled to your own record." He said, "Miss Denise, am I going to be all right?" I said, "Arthur, I am going to look at this. I am going to understand what happened. If what happened to you was wrong, I am going to do what I can. But Arthur, the work they did for you, that work is free. You should not have paid for that work. That work by federal law is free." Arthur put his face in his hands. I sat with Arthur for a long time that afternoon. I told him I would need to pull his claims file from the VA. I told him I would need to look at what Sentinel had actually prepared on his behalf. I told him I would need to understand whether Sentinel was, in some specific legal sense, allowed to do what they had done, or whether they had crossed a line. I told him I was not yet sure of my answer, but I told him I would find out. He nodded. He said, "Miss Denise, my wife died 3 years ago. My son lives in Bakersfield. I am all right. I just did not expect." He stopped. He said, "I just did not expect." That evening, at my kitchen table, I opened a new manila folder. I wrote on the tab, "Arthur Bellamy, TBI Claim, 2024. I pulled out a yellow legal pad. At the top of the first page, I wrote, "Sentinel Veterans Aid, LLC, Pensacola, FL." I underlined it. Then, below, I began a list of questions. It was a long list. Some of the questions I knew the answers to already, some I did not. I worked at the kitchen table until almost midnight. My daughter Maribel came in at 9. She is 29. She is a physical therapist at the VA Fresno regional office. She said, "Mom, are you eating?" I said, "Maribel, let your father have a look at this." She went and got the plate she had made for me earlier from the refrigerator. "I did not mean that your father should literally look at the papers. I meant that I wanted the photograph on the windowsill." I looked at the photograph. I looked at Kirk in his olive drab fatigues at 23, and I asked him, "How many?" He did not answer. I already knew somehow that Arthur Bellamy was not going to be the only one. In the spring of 2024, a younger veteran named Luis Tavares Moro came into Post 509. He was 41 years old. He had served with the 1st Cavalry Division in Iraq from 2005 to 2006. He had lost his right leg below the knee to an improvised explosive device on a convoy route south of Baghdad. He had been rated 70% for a combination of post-traumatic stress and amputation. His rating had been increased to 90%. The company that had handled his claim had charged him a $3,000 deposit and a $9,000 success fee, $12,000 total. He had paid them on his debit card after the rating increase announcement, which had arrived 2 weeks before I saw him. Luis brought a copy of the Sentinel engagement letter with him. It was word for word the same as Arthur's, except for the deposit amount and the success fee structure. Luis also brought a copy of what Sentinel had prepared and filed on his behalf. I looked at it at the counter. It was a VA Form 21526B, a fully developed claim submission with supporting medical evidence. It was, I want to tell you plainly, competent work. It was the work I would have done for Luis at the post if he had come to me first. It had taken me about 2 hours to do the last fully developed claim I had filed for a post member. The total out-of-pocket cost to that member had been $0. I said, "Luis, may I ask you a question? How did Sentinel find you?" Luis said, "They called me. They called the morning after my quarterly Nexus letter came back from my doctor. I had not told anyone that my doctor had signed the Nexus letter, but they knew. They knew by the next morning. I did not yet understand how they knew. I would understand later, but I want you to hold that detail for now. They called Luis the morning after his doctor signed a Nexus letter. They knew." 3 weeks after Luis Tavares Moro, a woman named Marianne Oakwright came to the post with her daughter-in-law. Marianne was 71 years old. Her husband, James, had served in Korea from 1950 to 1952. He had been presumed dead at Chosin Reservoir and then not dead. He had come home. He had farmed walnuts near Kerman for 40 years. He had died in 2008 of a stroke. Marianne had been receiving dependency and indemnity compensation as a surviving spouse for 16 years. Her daughter-in-law had read that surviving spouse benefits could sometimes be increased based on an aid and attendance finding. Marianne had a cold, and she had answered the phone, and the voice on the phone had said they were a veterans benefits firm, and they could help her increase her DIC and get aid and attendance, and Marianne had said no 3 times. The person on the phone had called back twice the following day, and the day after that, and the day after that. On the 4th call, Marianne had said yes. She had paid the deposit. Then, when the aid and attendance determination had come back favorably, Sentinel had debited her card for $15,500. Marianne sat in the folding chair across from the counter. She said, "Miss Denise, I should have known better. I am so sorry." I said, "Marianne, this is not your fault." She said, "I should have known better." I said it again, "Marianne, this is not your fault." She looked at me and she said, "I should have known better." I could not get her to stop saying it. Her daughter-in-law helped me put her back in the car. That night, at my kitchen table, I added a 3rd manila folder. Arthur Bellamy, TBI Claim 2024. Luis Tavares Moro, PTSDAK, Amputation 2024. Marianne Oakwright, DIC Aid and Attendance 2024. and on the yellow legal pad, I wrote, 3 in 4 months, all Sentinel, all same language. I began to ask, at every VSO appointment for the next several months, a single additional question. Have you ever been called by a veterans benefits company that is not our post? Not once did I tell the veteran what answer I was looking for. By the end of that summer, I had logged 19. By the end of the calendar year, 38. By February of 2025, 67. All paid to Sentinel Veterans Aid, LLC. Total across 67 veterans in my service region, $1,247,800. I want to say that number again so that you hear it in full. $1,247,800. Paid by disabled veterans in my region of the Central Valley to a company in Pensacola, Florida, for work that American Legion Post 509 is required by federal law to do for them for free. I need to tell you what Title 38, Code of Federal Regulations, Part 14 actually says, because the whole matter hinges on a distinction that most Americans have never heard articulated in plain language. Under Part 14, a person or entity who prepares, presents, or prosecutes a claim for VA benefits on behalf of a veteran must be accredited by the Department of Veterans Affairs. Preparation of the claim means filling out the forms and assembling the evidentiary record to be submitted. Presentation of the claim means filing the claim with VA. Prosecution of the claim means pursuing it through the adjudicative process, including appeals. All 3 activities require accreditation. Accreditation is obtained by attorneys, independent claims agents, and representatives of certain recognized veterans service organizations. Sentinel Veterans Aid, LLC, and companies like it are not accredited. They have found a narrow and increasingly well-traveled path around the regulation. The path is this. They sell what they call independent medical evidence. They contract with doctors outside the VA system. They arrange for those doctors to perform what they call a Disability Benefits Questionnaire, or DBQ. The sale of independent medical evidence by itself does not require VA accreditation. That part is legal. The problem is that Sentinel does not stop there. Sentinel then prepares the claim narrative. Sentinel then assembles the evidentiary record. Sentinel then files the form with the VA. Sentinel then monitors the claim status and follows up with the VA. That is preparation. That is presentation. That is prosecution. All 3. Under a different company name perhaps, or stapled to a glossy package called Medical Evidence Consultation. But under the regulation, those activities are accredited activities. Sentinel is not accredited. What they are doing is, in the plain reading of the regulation, unlawful. I made a margin note in my own copy of 38 CFR Part 14 on the afternoon I first worked this out at the kitchen table. The margin note read, "It is not the DBQ, it is everything after the DBQ." In the late spring of 2024, I went to see Wilton Faribault. Wilton is a claim status clerk at the Fresno VA Regional Office. He is also a friend of my daughter Maribel, who works as a physical therapist 2 floors above him in the same building. Wilton is 51 years old, a retired Army Staff Sergeant, and a straightforward man. I brought him my 3 case files for Arthur, Luis, and Marianne. I said, "Wilton, I need you to look at something for me, quietly." I said, "On these 3 cases, please pull me the VA internal claim status event timeline. Please tell me the exact timestamp when the rating increase determination was finalized in the system. Please tell me the exact timestamp when the Sentinel debit card charge posted to these veterans' accounts." He looked at me for a long moment. He said, "Denise, what have you found?" I said, "Wilton, I am not sure yet. I need to know if they are watching the system. I need to know how they know when to bill." He said, "I will pull the records. I will call you tonight." He called me at 7:47 that evening. He said, "Denise, Arthur Bellamy, VA claim status updated to rating increase, finalized at 2:11 p.m., 9 July 2023. Sentinel debit card charge posted 6:46 p.m. the same day. 4.5 hours. He said, Luis Tavares Moro, VA claim status updated to rating increase, finalized at 9:17 a.m., February 22, 2024. Sentinel debit card charge posted 1:02 p.m. the same day, 3 hours, 45 minutes. He said, Marianne Oakwright, aid and attendance favorable determination finalized at 3:28 p.m., April 11, 2024. Sentinel debit card charge posted 7:14 p.m. the same day, 3 hours, 46 minutes. I said, Wilton, they are hitting the record within hours. He said, Denise, they are hitting it within hours on every case that has rating movement. I do not have the time or the authority to run it for the whole region, but from what I can see on these three, they have an automated system polling VAE benefits or the claim status interface on a very tight cycle. It is not people doing this. It is a bot. That is what Sentinel's callbot is. A piece of software that watches the federal disability compensation system. It scans the public and authenticated claim status endpoints on a tight polling interval. When it sees a rating increase or a favorable determination on a claimant it has previously associated with a paid engagement, it fires the billing trigger automatically. That is how they are always the first call, and that is how they are always there at the exact moment when the veteran is most likely, finally, to be able to pay. That is the piece of this that I want you to understand above all else. The predator does not attack when the veteran is weakest. The predator attacks at the precise moment when the veteran has finally been given the ability to pay. The federal government, in its long-delayed act of recognition, deposits the compensation into the veteran's account, and Sentinel software takes most of the first year of that compensation within the first 4 to 6 hours. In July of 2024, I filed a Freedom of Information Act request with the Department of Veterans Affairs Office of Inspector General. I requested all warning letters, demand letters, compliance notices, or enforcement correspondence directed to Sentinel Veterans Aid, LLC, between the 1st of January 2019 and the 1st of January 2024. The response came back 41 days later. It included 5 documents, one from April 2019, one from September 2020, one from January 2021, one from October 2022, one from April 2023. Each of them, in varying language, said the same thing. VAOIG has received multiple complaints regarding the practices of Sentinel Veterans Aid, LLC, including the solicitation and collection of fees for the preparation and presentation of VA benefit claims, activities that require VA accreditation under 38 CFR Part 14, which Sentinel Veterans Aid does not possess. Sentinel is advised that continued engagement in these activities may result in enforcement action. Each of the 5 letters repeated the advisement. The last letter, April 2023, concluded with the sentence, "This constitutes final administrative notice prior to potential enforcement action." There had been no enforcement action. I put the 5 letters in a manila folder labeled OIG Warnings, Sentinel 2019-2023. I sat with the folder for a long time at the kitchen table. Then I added a line to my yellow legal pad. 5 letters. No action. In August of 2024, I went looking in the congressional record. I found the transcript of a Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs hearing from April of 2022. The witness was Professor Evan Simone, a former Army Judge Advocate General officer and a law professor at a state university. Simone had testified for nearly 40 minutes about what he called, in his prepared statement, the gray market for veterans' claim preparation. He described the Sentinel-style companies in detail. He described the evasion of Part 14. He described the contractual structures. He described the automated billing. He urged Congress, and through Congress the VA, to enforce Part 14 with civil penalties, criminal referrals, and cease and desist orders. At the end of the hearing, the committee chair directed the VA to provide a response in 30 days. The response, submitted in writing, read, "VA continues to evaluate the appropriate enforcement posture in this complex regulatory area." 2 years later, at the time I was reading the transcript, there had still been no enforcement posture. I went to bed at 1 in the morning after reading the Simone transcript. I lay awake. I thought about Arthur Bellamy putting his face in his hands. I thought about Marianne Oakwright saying, "I should have known better," over and over, and being unable to stop. I thought about Luis Tavares Moro explaining that the company had called him the morning after his Nexus letter. I thought about the 5 unactioned OIG warning letters. I thought about the Simone transcript sitting in the congressional record for 2 years. I got up. I went to the kitchen. I sat at the table. I looked at the photograph of Kirk on the windowsill over the stove. I said to him, "I see now what this is." He did not answer, but I knew, sitting at that table in the middle of the night, that I was the person who had to act. Not because I was any more skilled than the professor who had testified, not because I was any more positioned than the inspectors in the VA who had written the 5 letters, but because I had, by accident of biography, the one thing that made me useful. I had a case file on every one of the 67 veterans. I had the engagement letters. I had the money paid. I had the VA claim record. I had the free equivalent preparation that I would have done. I had the delta. I had the pattern. And because I had been unpaid for 12 years, and because my moral inheritance from Kirk's death had already carried me past the point of needing anything back from the system, I could not be bought, and I could not be intimidated. In the autumn of 2024, I met Olena Stout Grisham by accident. She was in a continuing education class at Fresno State called Grant Writing for Nonprofits, which I had signed up for at the suggestion of a Legion Auxiliary friend. Olena was 61 years old. She introduced herself in the first session. She said she was a retired call center supervisor, now working part-time at a domestic violence shelter. We spoke after the second class. I mentioned, vaguely, that I was an accredited VSO doing a research project on how veterans were being exploited by third-party benefits firms. Olena went very still. She said, "What is the name of the firm?" I said, "Sentinel Veterans Aid." She said, "Denise, I worked at Sentinel for 5 years." I asked her if she would meet me for coffee. Olena Stout Grisham told me the following. She had worked at Sentinel Veterans Aid from 2018 to 2023, starting as a call center operator and ending as a shift supervisor. She had left in the summer of 2023 because, as she said, she could not continue with the scripts. The scripts were the operational heart of Sentinel. The scripts were designed to be read to veterans within a small window of time after Sentinel's callbot identified that a rating increase or favorable determination had been applied to their claim file. The scripts included, among other things, a segment that offered the veteran a 7-minute window to decide, on the phone, whether they accepted a doubled rating increase presentation structure. The scripts included language like, "You have earned this. We fight for what you have earned. We will not let them take it from you. You are a warrior." The call center operators were trained to recognize, and to escalate within the call, markers of cognitive difficulty. Those markers included slow speech, request for the caller to repeat, and expressions of confusion. Escalation meant offering an even shorter decision window and more urgent language. The scripts targeted the very veterans who most needed someone patient, an accredited VSO at a free post counter, and Sentinel scripts were designed to move past those veterans' protections before they had the time to think. Olena had left because, as she told me at the coffee shop, she had begun crying at the end of every shift. She said to me, "I have a granddaughter who has autism." I could hear in the caller's voice when it was someone who needed time. The script said, "Do not give them time." I said, "Olena, would you be willing to testify?" She said, "I have been waiting for someone to ask me that for 2.5 years." In the winter of 2024, I began to prepare what I called, in my own notes, the dossier. I numbered the manila folders from 1 to 67. I added cover sheets. Each cover sheet listed, in the same order, the veteran's name, age, era of service, service-connected condition, Sentinel deposit amount, Sentinel success fee, total paid, date of rating increase, Sentinel billing trigger time differential, and a notation of which specific clause of 38 CFR Part 14 Sentinel had violated in the handling of that particular claim. I organized by era of service. Korea era, 7 cases. Vietnam era, 24 cases. Peacetime 80s-90s, 9 cases. Gulf War era, 6 cases. Post-9/11 era, 21 cases. I added a second binder for the structural leverage. Section 1. Olena Stout Grisham Witness Statement. Section 2. Wilton Faribault Supporting Technical Affidavit on VA Claim Status Event Timing. Section 3. The 5 OIG Warning Letters. Section 4. The Simone Congressional Testimony Transcript. Section 5. My complete copy of 38 CFR Part 14 with margin notes and highlighted clauses. I spent most of that winter at the kitchen table. Maribel brought me dinner most evenings. I tried to eat at least half of what she brought. I want to tell you now what happened on the evening of the 11th of February, 2025, because everything after that evening was different from everything before it, in ways that I did not expect. Post 509 holds its monthly membership meeting on the second Tuesday of the month. It is held in the main hall of the Post, which is on Blackstone Avenue in Fresno. The main hall is wood-paneled, with fold-down metal chairs, a flag wall at the front with the American flag and the California state flag, and the Legion flag and the POWMIA flag, a podium, and a long folding table at the back against a coffee urn in the corner. I have sat at the Finance Committee bench for 11 of my 12 years as a member. The Finance Committee bench is the second row from the front on the left-hand side. I sit on the aisle. Consuela Raffleson sits on my left. Consuela is 73. Her late husband was James Raffleson, a Korean War corporal. She has been my friend for 11 years. At 7:02 on the evening of the 11th of February, Post Commander Gil Abrego Pimentel called the meeting to order. Gil is 61 years old. He retired from the Air Force as a Master Sergeant. He is a big man with a soft voice. He opened with the Pledge of Allegiance. He opened with the Legion Prayer. He read the minutes. He called for new business. He said, "I have an announcement tonight that I am very proud of." He said, "I have been working with a firm out of Florida for the last several months on a partnership that I believe is going to bring real value to the members of this post. The firm is Sentinel Veterans Aid. They specialize in helping veterans obtain the benefits they have earned. Through this strategic partnership, our members will have access to Sentinel's claims preparation services at a preferred member discount rate. I have spoken to several members of posts across our department who have worked with Sentinel, and they are very satisfied. I want to thank Sentinel for reaching out to us and for their commitment to veterans." 23 members nodded. I heard Consuela, beside me, take a small breath. Her left hand came to rest on my right forearm. She did not squeeze. She did not look at me. She just rested her hand there. Gil did not look at me. He looked at the hall. He said, "I know that our accredited VSO at the post, Denise Collins Evans, provides tremendous service to our members, and I want to assure Denise that this partnership is not intended to change that in any way. This is in addition, not instead of." He smiled. He said, "You know, this frees Denise up to do more community outreach, which she does so beautifully." The 23 members nodded again. I did not say anything at the meeting. I have not, in 12 years, said anything at a post meeting that was not in response to a direct question or a finance committee matter. I am not a member who rises to speak. I was not going to become that member on that evening. The meeting proceeded through the rest of the agenda. The meeting ended at 8:34. The members began standing, folding their chairs against the racks at the back of the hall, drifting toward the coffee urn, drifting toward the door. Consuela stood up with her hand still on my arm. She said, very quietly, "Denise." I said, "Consuela, let me have a minute." She nodded and she went to the coffee urn and she waited. I stood up. I walked to the coffee urn. I did not take a cup. Gil was there. He saw me and he smiled the big, soft smile he uses at the urn. He said, "Denise, sweetheart, thank you for understanding." He said, "We know you do the same thing, hun, but this frees you up to do more community events." I did not respond. I nodded once. I turned. I walked to the front door of the post. I walked to my 2016 silver Toyota RAV4. I put my key in the ignition. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment with the engine off. Then I drove home. I drove east on Blackstone. I drove past the lit windows of the chain restaurants. I drove past the gas station where Kirk used to fill up his truck on Saturday mornings. I drove past the Catholic church on the corner of Bullard. I made my left onto Maroa. I pulled into my driveway. The carport light was on because Maribel had been home. She was not home now. I parked. I went inside. I went to the hallway. I stood in front of the wedding photograph and the accreditation certificate. I stood there for a long time. I did not cry. I went to the kitchen. I sat at the table. I opened the folder labeled Arthur Bellamy, TBI Claim, 2024. I continued working. 3 weeks later, on Friday the 7th of March, 2025, I conducted the monthly Finance Committee review for Post 509. I am not the treasurer. I am the finance chair. The treasurer is an 82-year-old Legionnaire named Buster Henshaw, who has been the treasurer for 29 years. Buster hands me the budget binder at the beginning of each month. I review the line items, initial the pages, and hand the binder back. On the 7th of March, I opened the binder and I turned to the revenue side of the budget, and I saw a line I had not seen before. The line was titled Outreach Development Services. The amount for the month was $580. The cumulative since October of the previous year was $5,800 exactly. I said, "Buster, what is this?" Buster adjusted his glasses. Buster said, "I am not sure, Miss Denise. Gil set that one up. He said it was a referral program. Through that firm. You signed off on the budget package in October, and again in November, and I think every month since." I said, "Buster, which firm?" He said, "I think it is called Sentinel." I closed the binder. I went home. I did not say anything to Buster. I did not say anything to Gil. I sat at the kitchen table that evening and I did the arithmetic. $5,800 received by Post 509 in stipends from Sentinel Veterans Aid, LLC, in exchange for 29 referrals of post members to Sentinel services over 11 months. Signed off by me as finance chair on 11 monthly budget reports, under a line I had read as generic outreach expense, but that was in fact the reverse. It was not outgoing, it was incoming. I had missed it. I had been signing every month an institutional cover for a scheme that was paying my own post $200 per disabled veteran for delivery to a predator. I went to the hallway. I stood in front of the wedding photograph and the accreditation certificate. I said to Kirk, "I did not see it." I said, "I did not see it for 11 months. I did not send the Post 509 internal envelope to anyone. I did not include it in the dossier that I was preparing for the class action. I have never sent it. I put it in the bottom drawer of the desk in the hallway. It is still there. It will not be in the federal court record. It will not be in the congressional testimony. It is the part of this story that does not belong to the class members, and that does not belong to the federal system, and that does not belong to the public. It belongs to me and to the Post. And the reason I am telling it to you now, here, at all, is that you should know. You should know what the organizations that we believe in can do in a soft voice, and what they can do without knowing they are doing it, and what they can do when a retired master sergeant with a coffee-earned smile is the one deciding what counts as institutional hospitality. On a Tuesday evening in late March of 2025, I composed a cold email to a law firm in Pensacola, Florida, named Aylstock, Witkin, Kreis, and Overholtz. I had read about the firm in a national public radio investigation published in December of 2025. The NPR investigation was the first major national press coverage of the Sentinel-style companies. It quoted, among others, Professor Simone. I had underlined the name of one of the partners at Aylstock Witkin in my copy of the transcript. His name was Michael T. Sasser. He had formerly been a senior trial attorney at the Department of Justice Civil Division, Fraud Section, where he had prosecuted False Claims Act cases involving VA contractors. He had left DOJ in 2018 to become a partner at Aylstock Witkin. My email to Mr. Sasser was 5 paragraphs. I attached a summary document of the 67-case dossier. I also attached the Olena Stout Grisham witness summary, the Wilton Faribault claim status event timing affidavit in draft, the 5 OIG warning letters, and a 1-page table showing aggregate class size estimates based on my regional data extrapolated to national scale. The subject line of the email was, "Accredited VSO with documented pattern." I sent the email at 10:17 in the evening. I closed my laptop. I went to bed. I did not expect a reply for days, or perhaps at all. Mr. Sasser replied at 9:11 a.m. Pacific Time the following day, 41 hours after I had sent my original message. His reply read, "Ms. Collins Evans, thank you for reaching out. We have been developing a case of this type for several months, and your dossier is, frankly, the most substantive single data set I have seen submitted from any volunteer source. I would like to fly you to Pensacola at our expense at your earliest convenience. We have a conference room available any day the week of the 14th of April. Please let me know a day and time that works for you. Sincerely, Michael T. Sasser." I flew to Pensacola on the 16th of April, 2025. It was the first time I had been on an airplane in 4 years. The last time I had flown was to my husband's nephew's funeral in New Jersey in the spring of 2021. Kirk had not been able to come. He was already sick. I flew alone. Maribel drove me to the Fresno airport at 5 in the morning. I checked my bag. I had packed the binders. Mr. Sasser met me at the gate in Pensacola. He is 53. He is a tall man. He wears dark suits. He is, I learned later, a former Marine. We went to the Aylstock Witkin offices on North Balin Street. The conference room had tall windows facing east, toward Pensacola Bay. The sunlight was very bright. I opened the first binder. I began reading. Arthur Bellamy, traumatic brain injury, paid $15,500. Rating increase from 60 to 80%. Billing trigger 4.5 hours. Sentinel violates Part 14 at subsections 7 through 11. Luis Tavares Moro, post-traumatic stress and below-knee amputation. Paid $12,000. Rating increase from 70 to 90%. Billing trigger 3 hours 45. I read for 23 minutes. When I finished, Mr. Sasser said, "Ms. Collins Evans, with your permission, I would like to bring in 2 more attorneys to review this with me." He brought them in. I read it again. 2.5 hours. We broke for lunch. After lunch, Mr. Sasser said, "We are going to file this case. With your permission, we would like you to serve as our anchor witness, not as a named plaintiff. Your VSO status makes naming you as a plaintiff improper, but every named plaintiff we identify will come from your 67, and your testimony will be the spine of the case." I said, "Mr. Sasser, I have one condition." He said, "Yes, ma'am." I said, "I do not want a fee share. I do not want a witness contribution fee. I do not want anything beyond documented expense reimbursement. I want you to draft it into our agreement. I am an accredited Veterans Service Officer. I am not a whistleblower. I am not a qui tam relator. I am doing what my accreditation requires me to do. I will not accept money for doing my job." Mr. Sasser looked at me for a long moment. He said, "Ms. Collins Evans, our standard witness contribution fee in a case of this size would be between $1,000 and $500,000. Are you certain?" I said, "I am certain." He said, "We will draft that into the agreement." On the 10th of April 2026, Aylstock, Witkin Kreis, and Overholtz, with Los Angeles co-counsel, filed a federal class action lawsuit in the United States District Court for the Central District of California. The caption read, "Tavares Moro et al. Versus Sentinel Veterans Aid, LLC." The named plaintiffs were Luis Tavares Moro, Marianne Oakwright, and 5 other veterans drawn from my original 67. Arthur Bellamy was named as a posthumous plaintiff through his son, as personal representative of his estate. The class size was estimated at 8,400 disabled veterans nationwide. The relief sought was restitution of all fees paid to Sentinel, plus disgorgement of Sentinel's profits, plus statutory damages under the California Consumers Legal Remedies Act and parallel consumer protection statutes in 12 other states, plus injunctive relief enjoining Sentinel from continuing to prepare or present VA claims without accreditation, plus declaratory relief establishing that Sentinel's practices violate 38 CFR Part 14. In July of 2026, I was invited to testify before the Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs. The invitation came jointly from Chair Senator Jerry Moran of Kansas, a Republican, and Ranking Member Senator John Tester of Montana, a Democrat. The hearing was titled, Predatory Practices in the Claims Preparation Industry. It was scheduled for the 21st of July. I flew to Washington on the 19th. I wore a dark navy suit. I wore my Gold Star widow pin on my lapel. The committee room was the Russell Senate Office Building, room 454. Senator Moran called the hearing to order at 10:02. He introduced the three witnesses: Professor Evan Simone, returning from the 2022 hearing; Olena Stout Grisham, the former Sentinel call center supervisor; and myself. Senator Moran asked me to begin. I sat at the witness table. There was a glass of water. There was a microphone. I did not prepare a speech. I had brought the binder. I said, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Tester, members of the committee, my name is Denise Collins Evans. I am 54 years old. I am an accredited Veteran Service Officer with American Legion Post 509 in Fresno, California. I have served in that role for 12 years. My husband, Kurt Collins Evans, served as an Army Specialist 4 in Vietnam, and later as a civilian logistics contractor in Iraq. He died of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, a presumed Agent Orange service-connected condition, in September of 2021. I am going to read to you, in order, the names of 67 veterans in my service region who were charged fees totaling $1,247,800 by Sentinel Veterans Aid, LLC, for preparation and presentation of VA claims that, under federal law, should have been provided to them for free. I will read each name, age at time of claim, era of service, service-connected condition, and amount paid. I request that the committee hear each of these 67 names in full. I read the names. I did not rush. I did not emphasize. I read them in the order they appeared in the dossier. Arthur Bellamy, 68, Vietnam era, traumatic brain injury, 15,500. Marcus Delacroix Thompson, 71, Vietnam era, back and spine service connected, 18,200. Luis Tavares Morrow, 41, post 9/11 era, post-traumatic stress and below-knee amputation, 12,000. Bridget McLean Aronofsky, 56, peacetime 80s, military sexual trauma service connected, 9,400. Reginald Bellwether, 74, Vietnam era, Agent Orange presumed, ischemic heart disease, 16,100. Consuela Vargas, 69, Vietnam era, surviving spouse DIC and aid and attendance, 17,800. Tam Nguyen Ouellette, 64, Vietnam era, South Vietnamese ally, Agent Orange presumed, diabetes mellitus type 2, 15,200. Dwayne Thibodeau, 47, Gulf War era, Gulf War illness presumptive, 13,300. I read the remaining 59 names. It took me 11 minutes and 42 seconds. When I finished, I looked up. Senator Moran did not speak for a full 15 seconds. Then he said, Ms. Collins Evans, may I ask you a question? I said, Yes, Mr. Chairman. He said, How many hours of your unpaid work do you estimate this dossier represents? I said, Approximately 940 hours, Mr. Chairman. He said, That is 6 months of full-time work. I said, Yes, sir. I did it in addition to my regular caseload at the post. Senator Tester said, Ms. Collins Evans, I want to say something, and I want you to accept it. Thank you. This country has lost a great deal of its capacity for this kind of quiet and unpaid duty. You are one of the people who kept the capacity alive. I said, Ranking Member Tester, thank you. I would ask that you direct your thanks to the 67. He said, I so direct. 3 weeks after my testimony, in mid-August of 2026, the Department of Veterans Affairs Office of Inspector General announced a full investigation of Sentinel Veterans Aid, LLC, under 38 CFR Part 14. In September, the VA issued a cease and desist order prohibiting Sentinel from preparing or presenting any additional VA benefit claims. In the same month, the California Attorney General announced a civil action against Sentinel under the California Consumer Privacy Act, alleging that Sentinel's callbot automation had harvested Social Security numbers, dates of birth, and names of more than 84,000 veterans without adequate consent. The California civil action resulted in a $2.7 million civil penalty and an injunction prohibiting the use of the callbot technology against California residents. In October of 2026, the National Executive Committee of the American Legion conducted a review of all post-level stipend arrangements with third-party benefits firms. 14 posts in 7 states were found to have arrangements similar to Post 509's arrangement with Sentinel. All 14 arrangements were severed. The California Department of the American Legion removed Gil Abrego Pimentel from his position as post commander. The removal was conducted quietly. There was no public censure. Gil remained a Legion member. He moved to a different post in the Central Valley. I have not spoken with him since the 7th of March, 2025. On the 14th of January, 2027, the federal class action settled for $47 million. Sentinel Veterans Aid, LLC, entered a consent decree. The decree provided for disgorgement of all fees paid by the class, restitution to the 8,400 class members, injunctive relief prohibiting Sentinel from engaging in VA claim preparation or presentation activities anywhere in the United States, and attorney's fees and costs. The average restitution per veteran was $5,600. For Luis Tavares Moro, the restitution was $12,000, which was the full amount he had paid. By then, Luis had used the original $12,000 to pay his daughter's private school tuition. He asked me, when the restitution arrived, whether he should reimburse the tuition out of the restitution or whether he should keep the restitution. I told him to keep the restitution. The tuition had been spent on his daughter. No one was going to take it back. For Marianne Oakwright, the restitution was $8,800. She asked me whether she could donate it. I said, Marianne, you can do with it exactly what you wish. She donated it to the Parlier Community Center, where I opened the second VSO satellite in December of 2026. For Arthur Bellamy, the restitution was $6,400. The check was made out to the estate of Arthur Bellamy. I drove it to his son's house in Bakersfield on a Saturday in February of 2027. Arthur's son was 52 years old. He had his father's eyes. He said, Miss Denise, my father spoke of you. I sat with him on his porch for 40 minutes. I gave him the check. I said, your father paid $15,500. This is what he got back. I am sorry for your loss. Aylstock, Witkin, Kreis, and Overholtz offered me, pursuant to our original agreement, a documented expense reimbursement of $18,400. I accepted it. The expense reimbursement covered, in full, 2 flights to Pensacola, 3 nights in a Pensacola hotel, 2 flights to Washington, 4 nights in a Washington hotel, document reproduction costs, 3 years of professional copying and binding for the dossier, and a new printer I had purchased for my home office in June of 2024, when the old one failed under the weight of the work. I declined the witness contribution fee. The attorney's fees in the settlement were $13.2 million. That money went to Aylstock Witkin and to the Los Angeles Co-Counsel. It did not come to me. I want to tell you about Parlier. Parlier is a small city about 20 miles southeast of Fresno, surrounded by vineyards and stone fruit orchards. The population is about 15,000. It is a predominantly Mexican-American agricultural community. The Parlier Community Center is on Tulare Street. It is a one-story adobe-style building with a tile roof and a small courtyard. During my years at Post 509, I had noticed that older Mexican-American veterans and their widows rarely came to the post. Some of them did not speak English comfortably. Some of them had never felt welcome at the Legion, which in our region had historically been a largely Anglo institution. Sentinel had not overlooked them. In the course of assembling the 67-case dossier, I had identified 4 cases of Spanish-dominant veterans and widows who had been pitched by Sentinel in Spanish. Sentinel operated a Spanish-language call script. The Spanish-language call script was a refinement of the English call script. It contained the same 7-minute window. It contained the same urgency language. It contained additional pressure language that was specific to Mexican-American cultural patterns. It invoked, among other things, ancestral duty. It invoked, among other things, the memory of the veteran's father if the veteran had previously mentioned his father's service. I had read one of the Spanish-language call scripts, translated to English, in Olena Stout Grisham's materials. I had read it once, and I had not been able to finish it. In December of 2026, I signed a 3-year sublease with the Parlier Community Center for use of one room on Saturday mornings. I accredited the satellite through American Legion Department of California, which was, by that point, very eager to support whatever I proposed. I opened on the 5th of December, 2026. I served 5 veterans that morning. 2 were Korean era, 2 were Vietnam era. 1 was a post-9/11 era Army reservist who had never been to a VSO before. Maribel came with me that morning. She translated when I needed help. The 6th veteran arrived at 11:41. He was 82 years old. He was wearing a cowboy hat and a wool jacket. He had served in Korea with the 1st Marine Division. He had never before filed a VA claim. He said, "Señora, my son heard you were opening here." He said, "My son said, Pa, you should go to the Señora." He said, "Señora, may I sit down?" I said, "Of course, sir." I have opened the Parlier satellite every Saturday morning since the 5th of December. I do not serve fewer than 5 veterans on any given Saturday. I have served 93 unique veterans in Parlier through the first 4 months of operation. None of them has paid me anything. Each of them has received, at no charge, the full accredited VSO service that Title 38 Code of Federal Regulations Part 14 was designed to guarantee them. I did not attend Post 509 after the removal of Gil Abrego Pimentel. The post continues. Buster Henshaw is the treasurer. The new post commander is a retired Marine named Jacinta Calder Hurtado, who was elected at a special meeting in November of 2026. I respect her. I have not returned. I told Buster, the one time he called, that I was grateful for 12 years at the post and that the Parlier satellite was where my remaining energy belonged. Buster said he understood. He said he was sorry. He did not say what he was sorry for. I did not ask him. On a Thursday evening in February of 2027, I came home from the Parlier satellite. The day had been long. I had served 11 veterans. I had stayed at the community center until 3:40. I had driven home in the rain. I came into the house. I took off my coat. I stood in the hallway in front of the wedding photograph and the accreditation certificate. I stood there for a long time. Then I went to the bedroom. I went to the dresser. I took off the Gold Star Widow's pin. I held it in my left hand. I looked at it. I had worn it every day for 4 years, from the day the Agent Orange presumptive determination was approved posthumously for Kirk. I opened the wooden box on the dresser. Inside the box was Kirk's Bronze Star. He had received it for a logistics action in Iraq in 2007. He had never hung it on the wall. He had kept it in the wooden box. I placed the Gold Star Widow's pin inside the box beside the Bronze Star. I closed the box. I went back to the kitchen. I turned off the light over the stove. Kirk's photograph was on the windowsill in the darkness. I did not speak to him. I had already said what I needed to say to him a long time ago. I was married to a soldier. I worked 12 years inside the system that killed him. I spent 14 months documenting 67 veterans in my service region, paying a predator what I would have done for them for free. I helped Aylstock Witkin build a class action. I testified before a United States Senate committee. I watched the Department of Veterans Affairs finally act after 5 warning letters and 2 years of congressional notice. I watched my own post give me a partnership announcement with the predator, and I watched my own signature turn out to have been the institutional cover for 11 months of referral stipends. I wrote an envelope I have never sent. I declined the fee. I took my pin off. I opened a second office in a community that had been ignored by the Legion for 100 years. This is not a triumph. I do not want it to be read as a triumph. This is what was left after the predator was stopped, and after the compensation was distributed, and after 7 of the 67 veterans had died, and after the $1,247,800 that they should never have paid had been, in part, returned to them. The thing I want you to carry from this, if you carry anything, is this. The federal regulation is the shield. The shield does not enforce itself. The shield was placed, in the language of 1,000 pages of rulings and statutes, decades ago, because a vulnerable class of Americans had earned a class of benefits whose complexity exceeded what any ordinary person could navigate alone. Someone, at some point, understood that it was not acceptable to make a disabled veteran pay for the privilege of receiving what he had already earned. Someone wrote that understanding into federal regulation. And then, very slowly, over many years, the shield was taken apart by people with better suits and louder voices than the disabled veterans it was designed to protect. The shield was taken apart by a 5-year procession of OIG warning letters that were never enforced. The shield was taken apart by a Senate testimony in 2022 that received a 2-sentence written response. The shield was taken apart, inside my own organization, by a retired master sergeant with a coffee-earned smile who was taking $200 per referral and not telling the finance chair what the line item really was. The shield was put back, in part, by 67 manila folders on a wooden table in a ranch house in East Central Fresno, $1,247,800 of arithmetic, 5 FOIA letters, 1 Senate testimony, and the patience of 1 call center supervisor who could not continue with the scripts. The shield was put back imperfectly. 7 of the 67 are dead. The money most of them paid was spent on tuition, and on rent, and on medical bills, and on groceries, and on the first new refrigerator in 11 years. The money they got back was not the same money. It arrived later. It arrived for some of them too late. For Arthur Bellamy, it arrived in his son's hand on a Saturday afternoon on a porch in Bakersfield. The refrigerator is still white. The tuition is still paid. The mortgage is still current. My husband used to say, when something in the yard broke and it was my afternoon for yard work, that a fix was not the same as a repair, and a repair was not the same as the original, and the original was gone, and you did the fix, and the fix held, and it was enough. I did not know for 35 years exactly what he meant by that. I know now. The fix is not the same as the repair. The repair is not the same as the original. The original is gone. You do the fix holds. It is enough. I will be 65 in 11 years. I will keep the Parlier satellite open as long as the Department of California of the American Legion permits, and as long as my health permits. I am training 2 volunteers at the satellite for eventual accreditation. One is a 32-year-old Mexican-American woman who is herself the daughter of a Vietnam-era veteran. One is a 39-year-old Korean-American man who is himself a post-9/11 era Navy veteran. They are both excellent. When they are both accredited, I will shift to part-time. I will take a morning a week away to walk. I will spend more afternoons in the garden behind the ranch house. I will spend more evenings with my daughter. I will not put the Gold Star Widow pin back on. It is in the wooden box. The Bronze Star is in the wooden box. The box is on the dresser. The wedding photograph is in the hallway. The accreditation certificate is in the hallway. The house is the house it has always been. The RAV4 is in the driveway. On the bumper of the RAV4, Beside the American Legion decal, there is now a second decal. The second decal says, VSO Parlier Satellite. It is the same green as the Legion decal. It is a little smaller. Maribel had it made for me as a gift when I opened the satellite. I did not ask her to have it made. She had it made. That is the story of the accreditation gap, as I have lived it. The people whose names I read to the committee, the people who paid what they should not have paid, the organization I served for 12 years that I will not return to, the organization I opened in Parlier that I will serve for as long as I am able, the man I was married to, whose service killed him, and whose death gave me the moral inheritance that carried me through 14 months of 67 manila folders at a kitchen table. I have said what I needed to say. There is nothing else to add.